Of the many words used to describe the band Mastodon, the one heard most often is progressive. Well, they've certainly progressed. Crawling out of the sludge scene of the American South in the early 2000s, Atlanta, Georgia's Mastodon immediately made fans and critics take notice. The band was first signed by influential extreme metal label Relapse, but it didn't take long to snag a major label deal with Warner. Soon they were appearing on Conan O'Brien and David Letterman, and nominated for Grammy Awards. Not bad for a band writing musically complex psychedelic concept albums about Moby Dick and astral projection. Over the years, many fans, including myself, have watched Mastodon's ascent with excitement. Might this be the metal band to reach Metallica-level stardom? But others worried about those increasingly catchy singles and clean vocals. Just how accessible were they going to get? This week, the band releases their 7th album, Emperor of Sand. So we take a look back and ask, what's the best Mastodon album of all time? Today on Lock Horns, a debate on one of metal's most imaginative bands, Mastodon. Welcome back to Lock Horns, Banger TV's live weekly metal debate show, coming to you from the Banger Bar. If you're watching this in the archive, please subscribe to the channel and you can never miss a show. This week, it's Mastodon week. As you know, tomorrow their brand new album, Emperor of Sand, officially lands. And so on Lock Horns this week, we're gonna dig into every Mastodon album and debate which one is the best. And to help me navigate this career is the one, the only, Calum Slingerland from Exclaim. How are you?
I'm doing well, Sam. Thanks for having me on.
You bet, buddy. Thanks for joining us on the show. You're a Mastodon fan.
I am a Mastodon fan as well as a metal fan, yes.
Tell me about how you entered the cult that is Mastodon.
A friend gave me a mixed CD about the year 2006, 2007, and it had 2 tracks from Blood Mountain on it, Colony of Birchmen, and The Wolf is Loose. And at the time, I thought it was pretty cool as far as musicianship went, as a big progressive rock fan. But as far as digging back into the older material, the vocals were a bit hit and miss with me at the time, but obviously I outgrew that. And thought that this would be a pretty cool band to follow up on. And of course then Crack the Sky was released, where they doubled down on all things prog, and it blew my mind. It immediately endeared me to them. And then I saw them in Ottawa at a festival in 2012, I believe it was, on the Hunter Tour. And it was a bit of a unique experience. This festival kind of put them on the second smallest stage, and the vocals in the live mix were dead. The crowd was yelling, turn it up, and the band kind of acknowledged it and were having fun listening to the entire crowd, which was packed in there, sing things back to them. And I was right up at the front of the guardrail, and I think it was after Aqua Dementia they had played nearer to the end of the set. Troy and I kind of lock eyes from the stage, and he runs over and throws me his red cup of drink, and I'm like, okay, I'm taking transit home after the show, don't need to drive. Bottoms up, gin and tonic or something like that. And I'm like, wow, I'm a fan for life. And I ended up catching one of Bill's picks and getting a set list.
So tell me the story. Was Mastodon a gateway into metal, or were you already into metal before Mastodon and you eventually led to Mastodon?
I was into metal before Mastodon, kind of an offshoot of, you know, listening to rock and punk growing up. And a lot of that revolved around progressive rock, and I got into progressive metal by extension through precursors like your Rush and, you know, British new wave of heavy metal and things like that. And obviously following along with them as well, and following through the genre, I now consume everything from metalcore and hardcore to black metal from Japan. But getting into Mastodon, progressive metal has kind of always been my wheelhouse as far as writing and listening.
Very cool. Well, speaking of writing, check out Calum over at Exclaim. The man knows his stuff. Okay, well, as you know, the routine on Lock Horns, we want to hear from all of you out there what you think of all of the Mastodon releases. The goal here really is to pick the best Mastodon record as voted by viewers of Lock Horns, and in the process do a bit of a ranking. So we don't want to just hear fucking love Remission, man, they sucked ever since then, or any of that stuff. We actually want to hear your opinions. Why Give us something constructive to chew on. And I want to give a shout out to everyone that's joining us from around the world, where Mastodon reigns. We've got people joining us from Finland, Germany, Serbia, Netherlands, Croatia, Denmark, Brazil, Hungary, Chile. In the US, we've got folks from Florida, Texas, New Jersey, Michigan, Colorado, and out there on the east coast of Nova Scotia in Canada. And we've got new viewers this week. Welcome to Lock Horns. Joining us from Italy, Iceland, Scotland, Mexico, and Thailand. Very cool. Welcome to all of you. And welcome also to Lisa Ladisur. How are She is equipped with the cowbell from hell in all of live television.
Or at least this bar.
We're not quite sure. Okay, so before we dig into the records, Calum, maybe you could give us your perspective on the history of Mastodon. How has the band got from where they started to where they are now?
Well, Sam, the band, of course, formed in 2000, kind of from the ashes of drummer Bran Daler and guitarist Bill Kelleher leaving their previous band, Today Is the Day, and it was at a High on Fire show that they run into bassist Troy Sanders and guitarist vocalist Brent Hines. And it was there that they discovered that they had a mutual appreciation of sludge metal and rock bands like Thin Lizzy, and they decided to form Mastodon in their late 20s. And signed to Relapse Records, and of course release Remission as their debut in 2002, which was an absolutely obliterating way to start the band. And of course, that was very heavy, a little bit of prog mixed in there, and those influences would come more to the forefront on Leviathan here, released 2 years later in 2004. Call of the Mastodon would be kind of a repackaging of their earlier Life's Blood EP, along with some other tracks, and it would be their last release for Relapse before they signed to Warner for Blood Mountain, their major label debut, which was, in my eyes, a perfect mixture of the metal might and prog that they had dealt with earlier in their career. And then a 3-year break gave way to Crack the Sky, which is heralded as a progressive metal masterpiece. And then we get to 2011 with The Hunter, which is kind of strange. It was the first record since Remission to not feature any sort of concept surrounding it, giving it kind of a mixtape feel, some people refer to it as, and a lot more accessible as well, which kind of continued with Once More Around the Sun, as far as that being more of a rock metal or a rock record in comparison to their earlier metal geared material. And then of course Emperor of Sand arrives tomorrow.
Right, cool. Well, and I think important to mention, and we'll get into this later in the show, that the Mastodon story has not been without controversy, at least within the metal community, given that this is a band that over the course of, 17 years has sort of stripped back gradually on their kind of the bludgeoning, sludgy elements that were found sort of wall to wall, I guess, on the first couple of albums. They're still there in these later records, but they've been minimized, and that coupled with the fact that, over the course of the last 3 records now, there's been some pretty catchy, accessible tunes that aren't really sort of metal riff oriented, but they're based around chord changes and very melodic vocals.
Most
so
definitely.
That's part of the Mastodon story as well. Enough about me, though. The first thing we get to do with Calum, beyond that brilliant yet concise history of Mastodon, is, of course, we give him the grace of giving us his guest choice, because, of course, once again, this episode is about picking what we consider to be the best Mastodon album and albums. Calum, what's your guest choice?
My guest choice is Blood Mountain. Putting aside the fact that it was the first Mastodon record I ever heard, to me it's always been the most harmonious kind of marriage of that metal might and aggression from their earlier career and their progressive leanings. And its incredible other influences that they mix in include psychedelic rock and more of the southern influence that Brent Hines is known to play.
Right.
And kind of a footnote here in the grand scheme of things, but guest features as well. You have Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age, and Cedric from the Mars Volta and At the Drive-In, and the wonderful keyboardist Ike Owens, who is no longer with us, unfortunately, but that remains my favorite to this day.
Yep, very cool. Okay, well, we're going to move Blood Mountain up to the top, because the guest rules on Lock Horns. We'll get that up there Calum is kicking things off with Blood Mountain, and I guess that means I get to make my choice too. Not only do I get to host, but I also get to choose a record? What?
No, you get to read the fan chat.
Oh, yeah. All right.
All the
viewers
people from around the world.
Okay, I digress. Enough about us. Here we go. Blood Mountain, John Flynn. Blood Mountain, undoubtedly their greatest achievement, though Leviathan and Crack the Sky are fucking epic as well. To pick one is a tough choice, but Blood Mountain is everything Mastodon is and was in a beautiful journey that sounds and feels like a progressing journey up that mountain. Siberian Divide is also, of course, one of the best composed songs. Thank you, John. Jean-Sebastien Caillet says Blood Mountain is the quintessence of Mastodon's work as far as I'm concerned. Maybe not the most popular of choices, but it's so damn well balanced. You would agree, Calum? Horror Master, Blood Mountain is the legend album. It has everything from sludge to stoner to prog. This album makes you feel like you're going on a journey to another dimension and you're enjoying the ride. Anthony Kerr says Blood Mountain is their crowning achievement. It is Mastodon at peak musicianship and represents the perfect mix of Leviathan's sludge influence and Crack the Sky's 70s prog love affair. Take a breath. Volum Nesty says, I for one don't know what it is about Blood Mountain that people love so much. It's kind of like a mix of Leviathan and Crack the Sky, only those albums just do it better. Okay, so some difference of opinion coming in from Volum Nesty, whatever that means. And Matthew Levins or Levens says, for me, Blood Mountain has a real immediacy about it. It grabs you by the throat and screams in your face, punches you in the guts. The music tells the story fantastically. It puts you there. I like that line. It puts you there. This is definitely a band, I'm a fan also, that has the ability, I think, to kind of transport you in a certain sense because the sounds are so evocative and almost visual in a way. Would you agree with that?
I would agree. Without being too sort of complicated and everything that comes with the word progressive, in some instances that can turn a lot of people away as far as maybe bands deciding to cram too many sort of notes in one space, but they kind of even it out in a way that they feel is best and works for their concepts that are explored particularly within the early records, but is very appealing to listeners who might not be as entrenched in progressive music as perhaps I was or other people are.
Sure, yeah. And again, back to kind of the divide that happens on this band, I think that ability to connect with the kind of non-metal diehard community is also what's caused, I think, a bit of some noise,
most
if you
definitely,
will,
yes.
In the knuckle-dragging community that is metal. Okay, Lisa, is it my turn?
Yeah, it's your turn for a minute.
Thank you. I get 1 minute. I'm going to move quickly. Crack the Sky, for me, is my album of choice. And you know what? Before doing the show, I hadn't really given a lot of thought into this. Mastodon is a band whose sound to me has progressed actually quite gradually and quite naturally. And in many ways, there's songs that could appear on any number of their albums. You could take a song off Blood Mountain and put it on The Hunter, and it probably wouldn't be out of place. But for me, the crowning statement in terms of songwriting, in terms of composition, instrumentation, I think the album that really exhibits the capabilities of Mastodon as storytellers, as musicians, and the rest is Crack the Sky. There's elements of this album that appear on the earlier records and on later records. Don't want to give it away, but there's hints of it here on Emperor of Sand. But Crack the Sky was really that moment where I felt that they really took a bold step. And it worked. They started to layer things in with other percussion elements. I think it's where the multi-vocal approach really started to gel for this band. Brent Hines in particular, he's all over that place. There's banjo, there's all sorts of, there's triangles, there's all sorts of interesting instrumentation. What I also loved was you got the album twice, and you got the back half was the songs without the vocals. And I thought, what a great idea, considering that this is a band, to our earlier point, that really almost feels like a soundtrack to a particular journey or a particular place. That was more than a minute, Lisa, okay?
Well, I think every comment here is going to be a little long. It is a prog related episode.
Yeah.
The comments are a little longer.
Okay, let's go to the top of Crack the Sky. Here we go. Mikhail Lopez is back. Crack the Sky is their best. Their Blackwater Park, of course, an Opeth parallel. The album where everything fit together perfectly, extremely strong songwriting. Mikhail Novak says, at first, I was really turned off by hipsters liking them. Eventually, I got into Mastodon after they opened for Priest. Anyway, the album is great. Songs are long and drawn out. An interesting sonic landscape. Pleasant album to get high to, I suppose. No doubt you're not the only one, dude. Leonardo Bandera says, I bought Crack the Sky and still trying not to skip tracks on it or repeat Oblivion over and over. Really don't like the senseless lyrics and song progression. Interesting. Oblivion, I think, was the debut of Bron Daler on vocals as well,
yes.
which was like kind of like a new portion of the sky opened above us. Where are we going next? Unreal 1066 Crack the Sky is the worst with those rubbish vocals. Ready, mindset, go. No, Sam, no. Okay, glad we agree on that one. Esmond Topland says Crack the Sky is not only the best Mastodon album, it's arguably the best album ever. As soon as you predicted what you think and hope will come next, it gives you something more ethereal and beautiful than you could have ever imagined. Amy Laszlo, look, no one likes to take a shower with water that is too hot or too cold. Okay, this could I don't know where this is going. We like it to be right in the middle. Okay? And that's where Crack the Sky fits. Listening to it is like taking a 50-minute marathon shower with water that's the perfect temperature. I think she's Swiss. Everything's right in the middle. Is that it on Crack the Sky? That's all we're going to talk about.
Yeah, we got other records to get to.
Crack the Sky, you like this record?
I do. Not only for a lot of the reasons you mentioned as far as arrangement-wise and instrumentation-wise, but there's also a lot of emotional depth to it, as far as being an incredibly expansive concept that I certainly couldn't sit here and tell you about in the time frame that we have. But surrounding Bran's sister, who passed away at a young age, and all of the weight and emotion that he carried with him and lent into the recording of this record had an impact on my listening experience as well.
Yep, very cool. And I think it's, again, and I will shut up, I'm not like the biggest prog fan on the planet. I certainly like a lot of progressive metal, and my point with this album is I think this album exhibits what this band is capable of doing the best. Not a lot of bands are capable of making a record like this, and I think that that's really what I appreciate about that album. It was pushing them to their edge. Speaking of living on the edge, that was a mighty gong.
I'm trying. Well,
Okay.
it is this show called Lockhorns.
Yes.
So I can't let this little love-in for Crack the Sky go
Please.
without one more comment from the other side.
Here we go. Join us from the other side. Chris Deveria. I'm shocked to see so much praise for this album. Crack the Sky is 3 songs of substandard riff soup, lacking entirely in songwriting. You can't just chuck 321 riffs into 3 songs and call them songs. Then you get 2 pretty decent but comparatively underwhelming atmospheric pieces, perhaps best described as Mastodon meets Pink Floyd. The final 2 tracks unfortunately fall back into substandard riff soup. I mean, there's a point there. I don't think it's a cohesive record. It is kind of it's a bit schizophrenic in its quality, but it just works in my opinion. Do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, there is that argument that maybe it is just be like, okay, let's go here, then let's go here, and then let's like add a banjo and we're done.
I agree with the scattered, but I agree more with you in saying that it does work somehow. I mean, coming out of Oblivion into Divinations, I think the song is, but the banjo riff just kind of fading in up out of nowhere. It's a little bit kind of choppy in places like that, for instance, but I'm more siding with you in the fact that I always thought that it worked for me.
I think it takes the cake in terms of it being the most memorable album. The parts on those records stick with me more so than the rest of the records. Anyway, Heavy Metal Heretic says, as great as Crack is, they were on way too much weed. Since when was that a bad thing? But anyway, we all have our opinions. Lisa.
It's time to move on because
Okay.
there are other records.
Yes.
And for us to do that, we need to go backwards.
Okay. Well, let's go back to the beginning. As you mentioned at the outset, Calum, their first couple of records, let's get them in some kind of order here. Remission and Leviathan were released on Relapse. How would you characterize briefly these two records as a pair that sets them apart from everything else they did afterwards? Is it the sludginess? Is it that bludgeoning character?
As far as bludgeoning goes, it's definitely more Remission to that point.
Sure.
That was their debut as a band, and it's not like they were spring chickens when that came out. They were very experienced players in their late 20s.
Yeah.
But even still, they were a band looking to make an impact with a debut and just kind of crush everything in sight, kind of like Opeth maybe did with their first record.
Sure.
You know, it was very rooted in one.
I listened to Remission for the first time in quite a while leading up to today's show, and it reminded me just how kind of dirty and bottom heavy that band was, and Braun's drumming was just ridiculous, sort of locomotive quality. But
Still
anyway,
makes my head spin.
we do have a clip from Matt Jacobson, who, of course, is the founder of Relapse Records. I sat down with him during the making of Metal Evolution, and he had this to say about Mastodon and Leviathan. Tell me about the impact that Leviathan made.
Leviathan made a huge impact. I think that the band's buzz and awareness had grown exponentially during the during the Remission era. There was a lot of people just waiting to see what they did next. Again, to come out with a concept album about Moby Dick with a whale on the cover, I think just further intrigued people. And listening to the album when the promos went out and the fans got a hold of it and so on, it didn't disappoint. It was that evolution, it was that progression, it was taking things to the next step, and did it in a completely, I think, genuine and honest and natural way. People pretty much freaked out. I mean, they were suddenly getting glowing reviews everywhere, and they were getting covers of magazines, and they were being featured in publications that normally didn't write about bands coming from this music scene, so the likes of Spin and Rolling Stone and people like that were starting to pay attention and give them some ink. It feels good when you see something go from the basement of a house in a really bad neighborhood in Philadelphia to a nationally broadcast late night talk show performance.
Yeah.
That's a pretty rare occurrence.
Full credit there to Matt Jacobson. This is a guy who's done a lot for a lot of bands. He's always had that ability to find some diamonds in the rough. And before we went to the clip, we talked mostly about Remission. But let me ask you, Cal, maybe you could comment on this. What do you think set Leviathan apart from Remission? What did they do on this record that they hadn't done here? Any thoughts on that?
Largely letting their progressive rock influences kind of creep more to the forefront, as well as a shift in vocal stylings as well, which I'm sure we'll expand on later, but a lot less of the kind of dry scrape growling that Troy and Brent handled on the first record. And Troy started to get a lot more melodic as far as singing, and also more of a shout too, as far as just a plain kind of hardcore-esque, just projecting his vocals that way on the record as well.
I think this is the album where they started, I think it was with Leviathan and Blood Mountain maybe as a pair, where they kind of really started to nail those riffs that are now become kind of Mastodon riffs, you know what I mean? Like, full credit to this band, they have a sound, they sound like no other, but when they do things like dan, 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 like it's like Mastodon, right? But anyway, no more mouth riffing from me, because that's a sign that this show is going in the wrong direction. We do want to hear what you have to say about these albums. Lisa, Remission, here we go. Eric Garza. It has always been Remission for me. I just love the heaviness and craziness. Joe Broadbent, the first time I heard March of the Fire Ants on my tiny little mind was blown. I love the melodic guitar section in that. That's a sign of things to come in that song. Mikhail Lopez, I remember when Remission came out, it was a breath of fresh air in the metal scene. Bronze drums were the real highlight for me. Scott Toby, Remission. And then everything else sucks. LOL, bring on the hate. All right. It's like the Fenriz of sludge metal. Matthew Levins is back. They emerged from the primordial sludge, fully formed metal gods. Good point you made. They were like in their mid-20s by the time they put their first record out, which is older than a lot of bands. So they'd already kind of had a sound and a proficiency. Crusher Destroyer does more in 2 minutes than most bands do on an entire album. Jamie Laszlo, I rarely listen to Remission. It's like listening to a decent album that's being played at the wrong speed through a wall of mud. Fair enough. Go easy, Jamie. Danger Escape Plan. Got it. For 2002, that album slays most other garbage that was out at that time. That, of course, is referring, I think, more to Leviathan than Remission. But in any case, we got one more here. Raphael Fireblade, Mastodon Remission album took prog metal to new heights. It's like mixing Tools, Undertow album mixed with Black Sabbath Paranoid album. You get Remission. That's kind of a cool combo. Not sure it's Paranoid, but anyway, don't get me down that fucking rabbit hole. Leviathan?
Yeah, take a breath.
Take a breath. A lot of
Because
words.
it's Nick Ottaviano, master.
No, not Nick. Yeah, Mastodon people. Bit smarty pants here on the boards today. Here we go. Nick is back. It's hard to imagine where the band would be if they hadn't released Leviathan. Leviathan, in my eyes, still holds up as strongly as almost 15 years later. It's kind of like to Ride the Lightning, I guess, in a way. Songs like Blood and Thunder, Classic, and Sea Beast. I mean, these are songs they still play in their set. That's a testament to that record. So easily and masterfully intertwined prog rock with sludge riffs into one epic masterpiece. Carl Leitenberger says Leviathan because of the riffs and for rejuvenating heavy music in the early 2000s. Good point. Tough time. Going on. A lot of baggy pants going on. Everything after Crack the Sky is meh. Raphael Fireblade says Leviathan is a masterpiece, adding sludge elements to prog metal, and some of their best guitar riffing are in this album, and Troy Sanders and Brett Hines are gods. All right, got some love in the air. Anything else?
It's either people really like Leviathan or they don't have anything to say about it.
Okay, well, let's move on then, shall we? If people don't have anything to say, we shall move on. We're going to the Twitter poll on this?
It's true. We did a Twitter poll, actually, on the best early records up until Crack the Sky, I think.
Yes.
And Crack the Sky came out on top.
Right.
With Leviathan as a close second.
Okay.
So
good to know. Good to know. I was actually surprised. I had, leading to a bit of a side, I had no real concept going into this show, really, of what people would pick. And I was actually surprised by how many people did say that Crack the Sky was their favorite album. I'm going back to Crack the Sky a bit here because it makes sense, but it was very different than the previous three records. And I was kind of expecting more Leviathan and Blood Mountain lovers out there, but what do I know, Calum? Not much, apparently. So post Crack the Sky. Is that where we're
so now
going?
we're going to leapfrog over where we were at the start and talk about the records that came out after Crack the Sky. Sorry, that guy who thinks they're all like, meh, but you can come back later if you want.
Okay.
We're going to spend some time with those.
Okay, step back and so refresher on the history. We had the Relapse albums with Remission and Leviathan. Leviathan is the album where really people start taking notice outside, I think, of a very small community of sludge metal and kind of hardcore lovers. Blood Mountain, of course, builds on that with their it's their major label debut, and in many ways I think is kind of like, in my mind, it's like Leviathan Part 2. It's like the more perfected. It's like Master of Puppets is To Ride the Lightning. Crack the Sky, we've already talked about that, kind of opens up a whole new direction in the band. But post Crack the Sky has probably been the most talked about era of this band. Talk about the records that follow Crack the Sky.
Starting with The Hunter, I always have felt in speaking to Mastodon fans, either that I know or that I see at shows or things like that, I feel that I'm always a bit too kind to this one, or kinder than most fans, I would say. As I mentioned earlier, they move in a more perhaps mainstream direction. They teamed up with a producer who had worked with everyone from Alanis Morissette to Eminem. And of course, you can't really predict what the result's going to be. But at the same time, it's not to say it's a completely pop-oriented record.
No.
There's no concept. There's a lot of different sounds going on as far as, it's a pretty lengthy track list too, I think. Like a lot of different things mixed in across, and still leanings to their progressive sides and their sludgy sides, but simpler song structures, kind of a lot of hooky guitar riffs that you go away singing. A lot more singing too, a demonstrated improvement from both Troy and Bran as far as clean vocals go, and Brent pops up in a few places with that growl, but again, they've kind of relegated that more to the background with the Hunter at first.
And just to jump in, an interesting turn post this record. Like it seems to be a very deliberate decision on the part of this band, although most musicians will deny that any decision is particularly deliberate or premeditated. It all just happens organically. But that this is quite a departure from this record.
Yes.
And I think probably surprised a lot of people.
Yeah, no 13-minute songs on this one. No. All are kind of in that 4 or 5 minute range. There are a couple that go over 6 minutes, but nothing you would immediately consider a prog rock epic with multiple parts within it like they did on this record here.
No songs entitled The Czar. Discuss. Okay, once more Round the Sun. What do you make of that record?
Moving forward from the Hunter, that takes a lot more of kind of the radio rock aspect of what they were doing with the previous record, and I've always considered it more of a good rock record than a metal record. Again, simplicity is kind of the key that they're going with here as far as songwriting and song structures, and some interesting things that they do with vocal harmonies. I'm not sure off the top of my head whether there are any kind of distorted vocals in any sort of place, like screaming or growling or any of that.
Yeah.
But shorter song structures again. It's also really good driving music. I had a labor job that I spent a lot of time with this one, but
to me, these are a pair, and these are a pair.
Most definitely.
Like
yes.
as I said at the outset, like a strength and sometimes a weakness of Mastodon, I find, is that I forget what songs the albums are on, and that might be a good thing because there's like great continuity and they've crystallized the sound. But on the other hand, I'm like, I have a hard time discerning the differences between these albums. It's sort of like a slightly, Once More Around the Sun is just a little bit more Hunter than the Hunter, if that makes any sense.
I usually think that sameness kind of aspect plagues Once more than it does the Hunter, at least as far as my listening experiences went.
Sure.
But
hey, we'll leave it at that because we just got belled. We going to a clip, Lisa?
Well, we have a lot of comments about the Hunter, and there's no consensus.
Okay.
So let's try and figure this out first.
Okay, here we go. The Hunter. Matthew Levins says, every song on The Hunter is awesome. If Leviathan was a rough diamond, they now have polished it. That's interesting. They see it as picking up from there. You want Blood and Thunder of the early LPs or the trippy expansiveness of Blood Mountain and Crack the Sky? It's all here. Interesting. The Nightmare Rider. I have to say The Hunter is an essential album as it is the best mix between all the styles they have done. Unreal 1066 says The Hunter is great because after the disappointment of Crack the Sky, it rocked, especially Colony of Birchman. The Nebulosity says Bron Daler's drums in The Hunter is outstanding. It's really cool that he recorded with the bottom drum skins off to create such an epic sound. Definitely Bron is always pushing the percussive envelope within the band. Aggressive Tendencies, our buddy. I would prefer never to hear Curl of the Burl again in my life. I would tend to agree. I'm not a big fan of that song either. It could be many different bands. I think that's why I don't like that song as much. It's just not as Mastodon can be. Ready, Mindset, Go. The Hunter was Mastodon trying to be Red Fang. I think The Hunter was kind of a test to see how commercial they could go. Good point. YX says The Hunter isn't a bad album, but it's a subpar Mastodon album considering the preceding records are so legendary. That's a very good point. I mean, they've established a big legacy to live up to. So as Lars Ulrich once says, it's sometimes easier to become successful than to stay successful. Heavy Metal Heretic said the Hunter is the worst post-crack album and it is still fucking awesome. It's great. I mean, a bad Mastodon record is a pretty good record, even though there's not a bad Mastodon record.
Still,
so we all got to put things, I think, in context. Yes.
I'm going to try and put some things in context and in order. I don't think we have enough consensus to move the Hunter just yet.
No. No.
We do have some clips
Okay.
from the Banger Vault talking about their evolution in sound that we'll get to, and then we'll come back and talk a little more about the fans' reaction to Once More.
Okay, Mike Portnoy and Ben Weinman of Dillinger talking about Mastodon.
Mastodon, to me, are like the Black Sabbath of modern progressive music, with a twist of King Crimson thrown in there too. It's all about the riffs with them. Riff after riff after riff, and they're crunching and so heavy. But at the same time, there's this unbelievable musicianship. I mean, Braun's drumming is just he's like the Bill Bruford of metal, just all over the place. And, what he does with his hands are incredible. I guess they also write epic songs. And I think they're not afraid to let their prog influences show. I mean, I've seen Brent talk about Zappa constantly and his love for Frank Zappa. And I've seen Braun and Troy and Bill, all of them talk about, Yes or Pink Floyd or King Crimson and their love and appreciation for all those bands. So I think they've been very open about their love for classic prog music, but here they are combining it with just these crunching, modern sounding riffs.
I'll be honest with you, and I'm good friends with those guys, and I jam with Brent, and he's one of my best friends in the business, I don't think there's nothing that they're doing in any of their songs that hasn't been done before, but the way they're putting it together and the way they are evolving is brilliant. I think they're coming more into their own as time goes on, as opposed to the other way around, where you might say kind of like the records that define some of the other bands that you're talking to, like us and Meshuggah and stuff, were like the earlier works, and now it's a matter of just expanding, maintaining, evolving in different directions and stuff like that. I think Mastodon's one of those bands that's just coming into their own every record.
Interesting comments there from Mike and Ben. I think one thing that doesn't really get talked about is you get celebrated as a prog metal band, which essentially at its core means experimenting and challenging yourself. But if you experiment towards a more non-experimental direction, you kind of get lambasted for it. So it's this weird kind of thing, where you're free to experiment, but just don't dip your toe anywhere that's accessible. I don't know, but that's just the curmudgeonly metal community I think we operate in. Okay, we're gonna go back to the board.
Yeah, one big inhale, because a lot of words.
A lot of words. We love our words. On Lock Horns, here we go. Matthew Levins. Best albums are either The Hunter or Once More Around the Sun. Okay. Best vocal performances, might be a point there. Best songwriting, most confident, artistic, diverse, beautiful, technical, and emotional. Not necessarily the most groundbreaking or artistically challenging, but the all-round most accomplished. One thing I will agree with is their ability to expand vocal performances on these records, for sure. Stephen Buckner, Once More Around the Sun is the brilliant prog homage and the rock metallic hybrid that Opeth wishes they could make. What do you got out for Opeth? Some metal fans erroneously associate the word catchy with pop or simplicity. Fair enough. Ernie, The Hunter and Once More Around the Sun are gateway albums for rock kids to become metalheads, undoubtedly. Mm-hmm. Delicious Dishes, The Hunter and Once More are really catchy, but suffer from bad pacing and feel a bit too rock for me. Duly noted. Raphael Fireblade, Once More Around the Sun has to be the worst album Mastodon has ever made. Way too overdone, and it was a little less heavier than their older stuff. Anthony Kerr, Once More Around the Sun has a good jam or two, but several songs completely stopped feeling like Mastodon. Besides Ember City, I don't feel any other song is essential listening. And lastly, guess who? Matthew Levins. I think Once More Around the Sun suffered because it was kind of similar to The Hunter. I would agree. But seriously, every track is epic. The Hey Ho sing-along was ill-advised, though. So, putting you on the spot, the fan, Calum, what do you think of these two records?
I think the fans want Once More ahead of The Hunter.
You do?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want Once More ahead of The Hunter? Do you have a preference?
When it comes down to it, I would stick The Hunter ahead of, I would inverse that order. The Hunter ahead of Once More Around the Sun.
Okay.
It, as far as my own musical ear, and of course this is just an opinion, but it is more interesting to me. I agree with a lot of points about the sequencing kind of being a little bit crazy, because one time you'll have something like Curl of the Burl, and then you can have a song with like Bedazzled Fingernails or something with just a random synth interlude. There's a lot going on. I forgot to mention that there are a lot of keyboards on that album compared to any of the other ones.
Right.
And for me, it's just musically more interesting with my background and yeah.
Fair enough. Lisa, I'm not really getting any sense of ranking yet.
It's not easy. There's a big love-in going on.
Because it's just sort of like everyone's got pros and cons. People, I don't think anyone said they didn't like Blood Mountain or Leviathan. Let's put it that way. There is difference of opinion on this, and there's certainly difference of opinion on The Hunter and Once More Around the Sun. So maybe the collective wisdom is suggesting that, you know, the first three records are the most loved. I don't know, but it's hard to get a sense here of like where the chips are falling so far.
Right. So now that we've heard a lot of arguments from different people, from Sam and Calum and the fellow chat Mastodon fans and the clips and all that, now you have the big picture. Maybe you can jump in the chat and rank them. Tell me who you think should be the number one, and I'll start trying to tally that.
Sounds good. Yeah.
We are going to mention a little bit about Emperor of Sand.
Okay.
It's not out yet, so we're not going to dive into it. Not everyone has heard it, but a little maybe recap from Calum, who I know has reviewed the record already.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on the new record, Emperor of Sand?
I've been listening to it fairly regularly for about 2 weeks now, I'd say. And as far as thinking about what came before it, I think it's kind of the truest marriage of their progressive tendencies as well as their increasing openness to kind of try a little more simpler song structures, more mainstream, maybe whatever word you'd like to use with that. Bran and Troy have become better vocalists, I think. There's a demonstrated improvement on the record. Of course, they're back with Brendan O'Brien, who produced Crack the Sky.
Right.
And there is a concept with this record. They haven't explicitly detailed it in a 20-minute interview yet, but it involves an emperor banishing a protagonist into a desert along with a death sentence, and then this protagonist is forced to wander said desert. And it was inspired by real-life events with their family members battling cancer to kind of create this metaphorical concept that the album revolves around. And it's not like it's a dour album either. It's very much about the fight to survive. You kind of get that with a lot more driving tracks and, again, huge choruses.
Yeah.
They bring some of the keyboards back. They bring the vocoder back.
Right.
I feel that if you didn't like The Hunter or Once More, you won't immediately gravitate to this. But as far as my personal rankings go, I feel that this may be a bit of a grower in comparison to the other two and could end up overtaking them as far as my ranking goes.
And of course, dealing with the metaphor of sand representing time, which is how you conceptualize time when you're dealing with tragedy and loss. Kind of a smart concept there. That was that was the least metal cowbell hit in the history of heavy metal.
It's almost like the gong. Well, we do actually have some comments about Emperor from people who've heard the record, because it did leak.
Okay.
As records are wont to do, but also people reacting to that first single.
Okay.
So I think we're going to show a clip of that just to remind everyone how catchy it really is, and then we'll talk about that.
Here's a bit of Show Yourself from Mastodon. So there you go. I mean, this is a band that knows how to hook you in, and you know, I think that Show Yourself, I mean, I think we could almost argue that Oblivion started that tradition on Crack the Sky, but certainly since then with Curl of the Burl, and definitely songs like Motherlode and High Road off Once More Around the Sun, Show Yourself is sort of the equivalent track here, where this could be on the next Queens of the Stone Age or Foo Fighters album, not the next sort of King Crimson inspired prog metal opus. But maybe they're capable of doing all things, and they should be celebrated for that. In any case, we do have some comments about Emperor of the Sand because it is floating out there. Here we go. Delicious Dishes. Honestly, Show Yourself wasn't very metal. Empty and boring even for their more pop tracks. Tend to agree. I go for High Road over Show Yourself. Chestbuster 1987. I think Mastodon has similar evolution to In Flames, only they didn't go that mediocre yet. Okay, those are fighting words from Chestbuster. Leanne Dibble, I am sorry, but Show Yourself was absolute crap. It's obvious it was made to gain a new set of fans. Completely stripped down radio ploy. Good word. Jamie Laszlo, Show Yourself shows that Mastodon could write a hook-filled rock album that would have 5 radio hits. They just choose not to. Fair. The Buzz 68, Show Yourself is an absolute anthem. If it was a Queens of the Stone Age tune, you'd all be sucking its dick. That is probably the quote of the week. We can cut now. We're going to commercial.
After the dick joke, it's like, where do you go from that?
Where do you go from there? I'm going to hold off on commentary because I've done a review for Emperor of Sand that's going to go up tomorrow on Banger TV, but definitely was an interesting listen, and to a large extent, I think is a continuation of the trajectory that they started with the Hunter, but they are, I think, somewhat hearkening back to some Crack the Sky elements, which, as you mentioned, might have something to do with Brendan O'Brien being in the room. We have a comment there. You want me to read that? No, it's gone. It's gone. Okay, artwork. To switch gears for a moment, we're going to chat about artwork, but we need to get to the ranking pretty quickly. Arguably one of the best bands when it comes to its visual aesthetic ever in the history of metal. Would you agree?
One of my favorites, in fact.
Yeah.
Not just in metal alone, but in music as a whole. I mean, having them all kind of splayed out before me here for the first time, it's interesting to see how it's progressed, but these early ones here, like, especially when you have the records in front of you, just the amount of detail in these illustrations, and of course as you go on it shifts a bit, but it's important to remember that this is an actual wood carving, and some early pre-orders of the record came with a mask version that you could like put on your head and stuff, which was pretty cool. When I first saw this one, I'm like, wow, what are we going to think of this record? Like, what kind of sounds are we going to hear with these? The gatefold on the vinyl edition of this one is pretty incredible as well.
And speaking of gatefold, you did bring in some of your Mastodon vinyl. There's the insert or the inside of the gatefold for the Hunter. Yeah, I mean, they've really found a way to kind of embrace the resurgence of vinyl culture and really found a way to make beautiful looking albums, and I think they deserve to be credited for that, because again, from a visual perspective, no one I think has really done what this band has done, really creating a distinct character with every new record.
You like that one better?
That was way better.
Phew, not fired from the metal show.
We're just gonna we need someone to just ring the cowbell, like the cowbell imp. No, I don't know. That's the wrong image.
I'll think of
More
something.
cowbell.
Cowbell cowboy. How about that?
That'll do.
Can I
That'll
get like a ranch hand?
Yeah.
It's time. We got to put these in order. We got to pick the number one Mastodon
We've
record.
literally got a few minutes left, and we actually have to rank these albums. Let's get started. I mean, based on my assessment of the conversation so far, I would hazard to say that although there is some love for these records, I think the chorus is screaming loudest for Leviathan, Blood Mountain, and Crack the Sky. I think there seems to be very little dispute that these two records are the best among Mastodon fans. I think their Crack the Sky, I think, is perhaps the album that some Mastodon fans are the most passionate about, because it really nailed the center of the dartboard for them. There are some that we've heard from today that don't like the direction, the sort of scattered, schizophrenic, multi-instrumental, where is this going next kind of character to that album. We had a little bit of love for Remission. We had a little bit of love for The Hunter and Once More Around the Sun. I'm not really getting a strong sense of which of these two albums people are liking more, but maybe I'll give Calum the benefit of the doubt here that The Hunter was an album that resonated a bit more strongly for you than Once More Around the Sun.
Definitely.
Remission is a bit of a question mark. I mean, we had a few people say that they sucked. We had Mr. Fenris of Sludge Metal said that everything they've done post Remission is shite, but I'm not sure if that really qualifies. So, in the interest of being somewhat provocative, I'm gonna suggest that this is the order: Leviathan, Blood Mountain, Crack the Sky, The Hunter, Once More Around the Sun as a top 5. But I need to hear what people think. Jacob says Leviathan is their best metal album, Crack the Sky is their best progressive album, and Blood Mountain is the perfect balance, so it has to be their best. There might be a point there that maybe Blood Mountain is the master of puppets and Leviathan is the ride the lightning, so to speak. Psoriasis says someone had to die for Sky to be made. Case closed. Time Signature MMA. I like Remission better than Crack the Sky, but I can live with this rating. Ernie, how the board looks now is actually perfect. Okay. Did we nail it? That was easier than I thought. We got Blood Mountain, then Leviathan, then Crack the Sky, The Hunter, and Once More Around the Sun. Just to be a shit disturber, I almost want to do this and see if people get up in arms. Just because I think Crack the Sky is a superior record.
Well, someone will agree with you because Stargazer just wrote, I can live with this order if you switch Leviathan and Crack the Sky.
Well, there you go.
It came in at the same time.
Okay, now with minutes remaining, perhaps even seconds, we've now got Blood Mountain at number 1, their Warner debut. We've got Crack the Sky, the prog metal masterpiece, at number 2. Leviathan, the album that everyone took notice, at number 3, followed by The Hunter, the first sort of, shall we say, more accessible Mastodon album, followed by Once More Around the Sun. Yes.
Last minute, please to move up Remission.
Okay. To where, though?
To above The Hunter.
To above The Hunter. So does that mean Once More Around the Sun bounces off, and we get Remission in 4th place, and The Hunter comes in at number 5? Are people comfortable with that? I'm just going to move these out of the way for clarity. Anybody out there? Does anyone give a shit? Is the real question.
They do.
Blood Mountain, Crack the Sky, Leviathan, Remission, and The Hunter seems to be the order at this point. I can hear the clock ticking. I can hear the sands of time.
I know, and I'm trying to, it's like, yes, no, yes, no, yes,
Here we got no, yes. We'll look on the board. Please move up Emperor of Sand. Well, I don't know if it qualifies yet. It's not out.
Tell, I'd say.
Put Sepultura up there. Not going to happen. I think The Hunter is better balanced, but Crack the Sky is cool on its own. That's a little better. Yes. Once more before Hunter. Okay, maybe. If you want Once More in the 5th spot, speak up now. Once More over The Hunter. I can't believe people think that that Hunter is better.
I don't know.
Right, and then you had it right, Sam, and then you fucked it up. Well, let me fuck it up again. Or am I just swaying to the winds of the moment? Am I just swaying to the winds of the moment?
I don't know. Calum, you're the guest. You want to try and put the hammer down on this?
The way we just had it before Sam made that switch was probably my preferred ranking.
People are starting to scream on the internet. You wanted The Hunter back.
I do.
You're pulling rank. Are you okay with that? You think Remission is a better album than The Hunter?
Having revisited it more since, and I guess around the time The Hunter came out, I can't really say that I did listen to this one a lot, and I still don't go back to it as often. But as far as a debut and what the band kind of wanted from that debut, I have no issue with that being ahead of The Hunter.
You got a lot of people disagreeing with you. It's just, I can't even
I knew
read
I was
this
going to get
fast.
chased off the show.
Yeah, I don't know, dude. I think we gotta let Unlike current political climates in many countries at this point in time, we are going to exercise a democracy.
This is what happens when everyone in the chat is high.
This is what happens when I look on that side of the board. I get caught in headlights, but I think Once More is more popular than The Hunter.
It
in
is.
The fifth
In the
spot.
chat, it is.
I did say it would be in the chat, but
Remission, Crack the Sky. I think we've got one. I think what we're certain of is we've got the right 5.
It's like
And-
very least.
we're like on a messed up Price is Right game, but the clock is ticking. But
This is a scientific process. Once more. It's on there. Okay, we did it. Crack the Sky is the best. I think moving it into second place was a brilliant move.
okay, stop reading
This
the
is
comments.
fun. That's not good TV. When I start reading the comments. I think we're closing the polls.
We're closing the polls.
Got to ring the bell. Let's ring the cowbell from hell. There you have it. Lockhorn's Mastodon Week on Banger TV declares that Blood Mountain, the top Mastodon record as voted by viewers, followed by Crack the Sky, number 1 in my opinion. But anyway, followed by Leviathan, then Remission, and Once More Round the Sun. We did it. We're done. Thanks for that, buddy.
thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
it was a great
anytime.
time. I loved
Come
it.
back. Thanks to Calum. Check him out on Exclaim. Thank you, Lisa, Daniel, Craig, and Andrew. Please subscribe to Banger TV. Next week, we're back with essential albums on early black metal. It's going to get cult. It's going to be far less fun than this episode. And joining me will be Jason Longo. Until then, see you next time.